everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
You think you can skip basic tags and still crush it with throwies and pieces? Wrong. There's a reason why you hear older graffiti artists give the advice of you need to start with your tags and work your way to throwies and pieces. All great writers learn how to use their tag and how to use it effectively. In today's video, I'm going to show you how your hand style and learning your hand style will skyrocket your skill with throwies and pieces tenfold. Whenever it comes time for us to learn any new topic, it's important that we start in the simplest form of that topic. Example, when we learned how to spell, we started with words that were one syllable. We didn't start with things that were massively long. And much the same way, with graffiti, we begin with your basic tag. When we start off simple like this, it allows us to have an area where we can kind of learn and try out basic concepts for this new art form. So when we're talking about negative space management, or we're talking about letter structure, we're talking about letter name positioning, well, we can try these things out on something that is very, very simple and easy to produce. Your basic letter structure, your basic hand style. This also has the added benefit of getting rid of a lot of the white noise, because if we're trying that stuff out, if we're trying to learn letter structure, negative space management, letter name weight, letter name positioning, and flow with your basic throw or your piece, then there's a lot of visual noise there. There's a lot of extra stuff that we have to worry about. Essentially just more distractions that are going to pull us away from what's really important. With your basic tag, you have much less of that white noise. So that's number one. But the other added benefit to learning your hand styles first is the fact that everything we learn with our tag is directly transferable to your throwies and your pieces. I have a lot of graffiti artists send me their work for a critique, and I see constantly that the issues people have in their throwies and pieces almost always appear in their tags. So that means when we're using hand styles to learn these very basic concepts, and we finally feel comfortable, we finally learn letter structure, or we finally learn letter name weight, then we could take that information and very easily apply it to throwies and pieces. Now, because of the nature of throwies and pieces and shifting from one subcategory of graffiti to another, you're gonna have new lessons you need to learn, of course, right? I mean, that's to be expected. If we're doing a throwie, well, throwies are fatter and they overlap a lot more than hand styles do, so we're gonna have to learn how to utilize that as well, and that's gonna cause some growing pains, no doubt about it. But you'll be in a much better position to handle those growing pains, in a much better position to understand and make progress with your throwies and your pieces because you have a reliable foundation with your tags. You already understand how the letter works. And if you want to learn a lot of those fundamentals, check out our book in the description down below. It is the best how to do graffiti book out there on the market because we walk you through each one of the fundamentals, step by step, explaining in extreme detail how they work. And we do so with hundreds of pictures, making it perfect for the brand new graffiti artist. And because there's so much detail, it's perfect for experienced graffiti artists as well. Check out our digital copies on our online store, theartistblock.inc, and physical copies over on Amazon. We have a link to both of those in the description down below. And because I'm excited to be getting married, use this coupon code WED to get yourself a discount over on the online store. This coupon code, once again, only works at theartistblock.inc. So let's take a look at an example, right? Let's say we have the letter, I like to use the letter R because it's a very common letter for a lot of people, and it also has a stem, a bowl, and a leg, which gives us a good variety of different kinds of anatomy to go ahead and look at. So let's say we have the letter R in our hand style form. Well, we know, alright, the stem is vertical. We understand that the bowl is round and it comes in at the mean line connecting to the top of the letter. We also understand that the leg shoots out to the side. And we know for a variant structure R, we can break that leg into two different lines to make it a two-box leg. Well, nothing changes for the throwie. So now suddenly, because we understand our hand style version, when we go to our throwie, we don't have to sit there and think, man, I don't know what kind of R to do. I don't know how to design this R. We already know. We already have the answers because we're comfortable with letter structure. So when we learn letter name weight and we realize, all right, a lot of the weight for the letter R happens at the top of the letter. And how does the letter support that weight? Well, the letter R supports the weight using the bottom left of the stem and the leg on the right hand side to stabilize. If the leg shoots out far enough to the right to where it's underneath the bowl, then it's able to support the bowl's weight and stop it from leaning over to the right, stop it from looking as if it's tipping to the side. But if the leg does not shoot far enough to the right, then the R begins to look like it's shifting to the right hand side. Now that's not necessarily wrong or inherently bad, it's just a matter of, did you plan for that to happen? If you didn't plan for that to happen, then you're gonna run into issues. If you did plan for that to happen, well then it's gonna be a nice stylistic flair because you know how to make that work. And because we learned it on hand styles, guess what? When it comes time for us to do our throwie, even though some things change, like the letter is thicker, right? The letter has got less negative space, but it still has a stem, it still has a bowl, and it still has that two-box leg. And if we don't shoot that two-box leg far enough to the right, it's still gonna lean over and feel like it's tipping. And the same thing goes with pieces, by the way, right? Nothing changes there. Now, here's the issue. New graffiti artists tend to skip learning their basic print and font hand styles. Almost no new graffiti artist does that, and this is where they run into problems, because they jump into throwies, they jump into pieces, they jump into wild styles, and that's fine, right? Have your fun, but they want to have their fun and also expect to create masterful pieces of work, despite never studying and practicing the fundamentals. So when they do that, they quickly end up realizing, oh man, you know what? I've been trying wild styles, and maybe I should come up with a throwie, maybe I should work on throwies, maybe I should work on hand styles. And the lessons that they learn in their pieces aren't transferring back to their throwies. The lessons they learn in their throwies aren't transferring back to their hand styles. And that's the way it works. Because these are more complex forms of graffiti, that information that you learn doesn't always translate backwards. And this makes the learning process very difficult for brand new graffiti artists, and even experienced graffiti artists who didn't maybe give enough attention to hand styles or throwies. But let's clear something up, because it's very easy to watch this video and think, alright John, you're telling me to go ahead and just study hand styles until I learn that. Well, how long should I study hand styles before I move to throwies? That's not at all what we're advising. But rather think of it like specializing in something while you kind of study other things as well, right? Similar to what you might do in college, where you major in a topic and you minor in something. So in this case, you want to major in tags, and you want to minor in throwie and pieces. So you want to focus a lot of your attention on your hand styles, basic print font hand styles. So maybe for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, you go ahead and you practice your hand styles, you study your hand styles, and then if you feel like it, you go on and practice some throwies and pieces. That's perfectly fine. During this time period, you're gonna do hand styles, and if you're new, you're gonna start to have these questions like, alright, is my negative space management right? Is my letter name weight right? And you're not gonna be able to answer the questions. You don't know the fundamental reasons for what's happening on the page. That's your key to study a bit more. As you learn and as you get better, you'll find that as you do hand styles, you'll still have some questions, but then you'll be able to answer them. And then, better yet, you'll be able to actually illustrate and draw and write the solution. So you'll do the hand style again, and you'll have the ability and the knowledge to fix those mistakes. And it's around this point where you'll feel compelled to move to a different form of graffiti as your new major. So now you might move to throwies, and it's going to be the same exact process. You're going to have some questions, but because you studied hand styles, you'll be able to answer many of those questions, but there's still going to be some that you can't really answer. I don't know what the solution is. You know, my name looks a bit weird and I can't figure out why, or maybe I do realize why, but I can't figure out how to fix it. This is the part where you do more studying, which, by the way, we have a whole playlist of videos, tutorials, you know, throwy tips, the whole 9 yards. We got it all above, man. And after a while, just like we saw with hand styles, guess what happens? You're gonna have these questions eventually, and you'll be able to answer them. You're gonna have the skill and the knowledge to go ahead and fix those problems. And then you decide to shift your major to pieces. The same process happens, and you'll find that wild styles become easy and natural. This is also one of those areas where people say, hey John, you know, how do I do extensions? Where do extensions fit into all this? How do I know where to place extensions? When should I place them? And really, that's one of the questions, right? That's one of the things where you find yourself asking about this topic. You don't understand it, you can't really figure out how to use it, and what you gotta do is you gotta dial it back to the fundamentals, learn more about those core basics, and that'll make you more capable of utilizing those more stylistic options. Also, we have a tutorial on extensions right up here if you guys want to check it out, and I will be making another one because I've seen a few people ask for it. So that'll be after I get back from my honeymoon, because spoiler alert, while you guys are watching this, I'm on my honeymoon. I just got married, and I kind of can't record if I'm not here. So what about finding your style? What about wild styles especially, as I know a lot of you guys want to get there. So how do we get there? The first thing we have to understand about style is the fact that it's just an exaggeration of the fundamentals. That's all it is. Think about the Incredible Hulk. He clearly has a human anatomy, but it's exaggerated. So I'm gonna cover the whatever bits here, but the Incredible Hulk's muscles work exactly the way that they're actually anatomically meant to work. They're just much larger, they're much more exaggerated. That's all style is. So to have style, we need to learn those fundamentals, and we need to learn them without style. That way we can have a proper gauge of what an exaggeration would be one way or the other. And once we understand that, finding our style is just finding our preference for how we like to exaggerate those fundamentals. That's all it is. Here's your normal letter, here's the same letter larger, here's the same letter thinner. Which one's your preference? That's your style. That's essentially how it breaks down. You do that for each letter, and well, before you know it, you got your whole name designed in your style. But you gotta learn those basics first. So pushing over to wild styles requires us to then take that exaggeration and exaggerate the exaggeration more. When it comes down to wild styles, let's kind of understand what that is. In art, there's a topic known as style thresholds. To illustrate this, I like to use just normal portraits versus hyperrealism. They're both portraits, but one is a lot more detailed. That's essentially the topic of style thresholds. So there's many ways in order to breach the style threshold into wild styles. Some people like to add a lot of extensions. Some people, they don't really care for extensions, and instead Instead, they focus on letter positioning with a lot of exterior details and a lot of interior details and a lot of letter distortions. Some people do a combination of both of those things, like Saber, for example, is one of my favorite examples of that. So it's not as if you have to use extensions, it's not as if you have to do a certain thing. You can still use your preference, you can still use your style and discover how you like to exaggerate the fundamentals, and then turn that dial up to 11 in order to breach into wild styles. But for it to be actually classified as a wild style, you do need to hit a certain level of detail and intricacy in the actual work itself. Now, here's something I want to clear up, because inevitably when I make videos like this as well, you get some people who say, just draw whatever you want, right? Just ignore the fundamentals, do what you want. And to that I say, hey, on this channel, I always promote people have a good time. Do and draw what makes you happy. But if you're coming here to learn, then we have to talk about the fundamentals. And we have to acknowledge the fact that they definitely do exist. The fundamentals are what is left of any art form after you remove all the white noise. The fundamentals are not created, they are discovered. And that's true for every art form out there. That's just how art forms function. Now, when you don't learn your basic tags, there's a lot of fundamental lessons that you're gonna miss out on. There's a lot of fundamental things that you're just simply not gonna have a grasp of. And because of that, when you do your throwies and pieces, there's a lot of amateur mistakes you're gonna be making. And they very well may stay in your work, in your throwies and pieces. And worse yet, you might even consider them to incorrectly be part of your style, when they're really just a practiced bad habit. And this is why you hear a lot of old school graffiti artists say things like Chino,
I think it's strange that some people have mastered piecing and can't tag,
said right there. This is why you see a lot of graffiti artists like Mears make a post like this, because every experienced graffiti artist who looks at your throwies and pieces can tell you didn't practice tags, because they're able to see those basic fundamental errors that you didn't refine. So in summary, when you learn your tags, you put yourself in the perfect environment to begin studying, practicing, and actually learning the basics of graffiti and the basics of your name, which then in turn puts you in the perfect place to develop and find your style. All of the fundamental information you learn during this stage is directly transferable and gives you a leg up when you begin learning your throwies and your pieces as well. But there's two major problems. Number one, adding style. Adding style adds more visual white noise, makes it more difficult to learn, and stops you from making the progress you want to make. Because all of those stylistic things you're doing are not only changing how the fundamentals are reacting to one another, but those stylistic changes aren't the fundamentals either. That's where it becomes visual white noise. Problem number two is the fact that if you ignore hand styles and you decide to start with throwies, or you decide to start with pieces and you begin to work your way back, then the information you learned initially isn't always transferable to the lower forms of graffiti. So if you're starting with pieces, that information may not be transferable to throwies, and if you start with throwies, that information may not be transferable to hand styles. That pretty much explains why learning your basic tags is important for every single graffiti artist. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let's have a discussion about it. And while you're down there, don't forget about our book that we released, which is there really honestly to act as your guys' graffiti mentor if you don't have one. It truly will teach you everything you need to know about graffiti's general fundamentals, using hand styles as a springboard to go ahead and teach you guys those lessons. Want more graffiti content? Check out this video right here with the best how to do graffiti playlist right up here. And I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.